United States of America, USA has given $103 million fund to Sudan, Egypt, Chad, South Sudan and Central African Republic to manage the humanitarian crisis following the ongoing war between the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF and Rapid Support Forces, RSF. USA through its agency, U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, said the $103 million is an additional humanitarian assistance to support Sudan and the neighboring countries experiencing the impacts of the crisis. According to U.S. Embassy in Khartoum, $50 million is for Sudan, $8 million for the Central African Republic, $17 million for Chad, $6 million for Egypt, and $22 million for South Sudan. The United States, through USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, is providing an initial $103 million in additional humanitarian assistance to support Sudan and neighboring countries experiencing the impacts of the crisis. The new funding includes $50 million for Sudan, $8 million for the Central African Republic, $17 million for Chad, $6 million for Egypt, and $22 million for South Sudan, to help meet increased humanitarian needs resulting from the ongoing crisis. USAID Administrator Samantha Power announced the funding during her trip to Chad, where she is meeting with Sudanese refugees and U.S. government humanitarian partners responding to the impacts of the ongoing crisis, U.S. Embassy in Khartoum said in quote. U.S. Embassy in Khartoum had earlier said in a statement that Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, U.S. representative to the United Nations, met during the week in New York with UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi. They discussed the recent violence in Sudan and the urgent humanitarian and protection needs of the 250,000 people who have crossed into neighboring countries in search of safety and the more than 840,000 who are displaced inside Sudan or can't leave due to fighting, fuel shortages, and fear, U.S. Embassy in Khartoum said. Meanwhile, U.S. officials also reported cases of sexual violence by the fighting parties in Sudan. Ambassador John Godfrey said in quote, "We have seen horrific reports of sexual violence at the hands of armed actors across Sudan. The United States is firm in its condemnation of conflict-related sexual violence, CRSV. We reiterate calls for all parties in this conflict to fulfill their obligations under international human rights law. This includes taking all appropriate steps to prevent such violence, enable medical care and other services for survivors, and to hold perpetrators accountable." Sexual violence has devastating effects on individuals and communities, and too often there is impunity for these heinous acts. We continue to monitor these reports and commend local and international organizations who are providing services to survivors and taking steps to help break the cycle of impunity. Angered to see the humanitarian toll of this senseless violence increase even more. The summer plant that was destroyed was the backbone of humanitarian child supplemental feeding programs in Sudan. 3 million children in Sudan already suffered from hunger and malnourishment. This conflict has increased that number. It is vital that the two sides build on the declaration of commitment to protect the civilians of Sudan by agreeing on an effective short-term ceasefire to facilitate near-term delivery of humanitarian assistance and restoration of essential services. Time is of the essence. The people of Sudan have already suffered far too much.